Well, good afternoon and welcome to the Idahoan Show. So, I have this scrap of 4140 alloy steel flat stock that's sort of tapered or almost triangular in shape. And I got to thinking that I could forge this out into a really nice blade for like a dagger or a dirk or almost a little short sword here. So, continuing our series on knife making, let's make a dagger. Of course, I started by heating up the steel so that I could forge the blade. Unfortunately, about halfway through forging the blade, I overheated it and melted off the narrower half of the blade. So instead of a long, graceful blade, we're going to have sort of a short, stubby one. After forging the rough shape of the blade, I cleaned it up a little with an angle grinder. Next, I drilled and tapped threaded holes in a pair of 3/8 inch diameter rods that would become the handle of the dagger. Then I forged down a short piece of square stock for the handguard, which I also cleaned up using my angle grinder. I welded the blade, handguard, and handle rods together and then heated the whole thing until it glowed bright orange and quenched it in oil to harden the steel. After removing the oxide scale with a flap wheel on my angle grinder, I tempered the steel by heating it with a plumbing torch until it just barely started to discolor. I drilled a couple holes in a little block of scrap steel and then smoothed its corners a little with my angle grinder to make the pommel. Next, I cut up some scraps of saddle leather into small rectangles and punched a pair of holes in each of them so that they would fit over the handle rods. Once I installed the pommel and tightened down the screws, this gave me a stacked leather handle, which I shaped using a hacksaw, coarse grit flap wheel, and finally sandpaper. I applied a generous coat of linseed oil to the handle. At this point, all that remained was to polish the tempering discoloration off the blade and sharpen it. However, I realized that the handguard design would make it impossible to sharpen the base of the blade with a whetstone, so before attempting to sharpen it, I reshaped the blade slightly using a Dremel grinder. Well, here's my completed dagger. Mostly, I'm afraid it's kind of a showcase of my mistakes. First, I melted off part of the blade when I was forging it, and then I didn't get the blade quite square with the handle when I was welding it all together, and then I made kind of a funny extra divot in one side of the stacked leather handle when I was shaping it. That said, it's certainly a real sturdy knife. It's actually reasonably well balanced, and I was able to get it razor sharp, so I think the process that I've used here is valid. Maybe somebody else on YouTube can take this methodology for knife making and implement it with better results. In any case, thank you for watching the Idahoan Show.